And good evening and welcome to Frankly Speaking, where truth is our mission, reality our realm, set as we see it and frankly as well. We have a special guest, co-host, no guest, co-host, Gary Brenner. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Joe. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure having you. I want to go down a little history with you because you come from a long-term Lynn family, and we're going to get into that. But first, folks, to Frankly Joe. There are pension funds and there are pension funds. For example, the MBTA pension fund, Harry Markopoulos of Bernie Madoff fame, said that the MBTA pension fund is one bear market away from disaster. The underlying cause of the MBTA's problem was and is poor management and poor oversight. No good outcomes result when you mix politics and money, noted Markopoulos. On the other hand, take the Lynn Pension Fund, and that's why Gary's here to talk about it. Back in 2009, 8 and 9, when the market took a little dipsy-do, and in fact crashed, the Lynn Pension Fund was faced with some serious challenges and choices. Thankfully, through good management and vigorous oversight, the Lynn Pension Fund is on track to be fully funded by 2034, I hope I'm around, and enjoys 300, and I'm going to edit this because it's 308, am I correct? $308 million worth of assets. So unlike the MBTA's pension fund, which Markopoulos describes as tender victuals retirement plan, meaning sarcastically that its pensioners will be eating cat food, the City of Lynn's pension fund is sound. And on that note, nice to have you here.
Well, thank you very much, Joe.
So before we get into things, I'd like to run down memory lane with you a little bit. You were born in Lynn, and apparently you've been associated with the city in one capacity or another for 40-odd years.
Yes,
You don't look that old.
Thank you. Thank you very much. No, I have been, I've been working for the city for, it will be 40 years next year. Our family has always been associated with the city. People know my father, Gary Brenner, who taught in the Lynn Public Schools and coached. My mother worked for a prominent pediatrician, Dr. Albert Brown.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Oh, great
one
doctor.
Of the best.
One of the best.
Yep.
Oh, my God. He would make house calls at 2 in the morning. He was the last of his breed.
Different era.
Yes, definitely. And we have lived in the city, and we love the city.
You still live in the city?
Yes, I do.
You know, Dad would be about 100 if he were alive today.
He would be 100 next year.
And yet, actually, he had a healthy life. He almost made it to 95, 96, didn't he?
Correct. Correct. He died 5 years ago.
Well, we'll get into him because he's one of Lynn's legends, you know.
All right.
The mission of the, Pedro, if you can throw this up, all about pensions, Lynn's pensions, a little graphic so the folks can see it. Yeah. The mission of the Lynn's Retirement Board is to serve the members of the City of Lynn's retirement system, the employees, and the retirees, and the beneficiaries of the City of Lynn. That includes the Lynn Housing Authority.
Correct.
The Lynn Water Sewer Commission.
Correct.
And once again, 308, this is your latest, $308 million worth of assets, which is pretty darn good.
It is.
Fully funded by 2034, although that's subject to change. It could be earlier.
It could be if the market keeps going the way it is, but you can't count on that. But that 2034 is subject to change.
Yeah, you told me every 2 years is that
every 2 years we have an actuarial study done by PERAC, who is our watchdog agency. They're the Public Employee Retirement Administration Commission, and they do a great job, led by Joe Corrington and Jim Lomenzo. They're great people.
And we'll get into that because I think I have a worksheet on them and I want to go through it. And the last thing is that, and you can correct me, annually the City of Lynn makes an appropriation to the retirement fund.
Correct. By
this
law.
year it's approximately rounded off 32 million, and it steadily seems to be climbing about $1 million per year.
Correct.
Is that accurate?
That's correct. Right now it's about a 4% increase every year. And again, that is subject to change when the next actuarial study comes, and we're going to have another one at the end of 2017. We'll have one.
Well, let's take a look at your organization. And what I found fascinating is you have a sum total of 2 people.
Correct.
On your staff, you and whomever. Would you like to tell me who whomever is?
Sure, sure. Well, unfortunately, last year, my assistant of 13 years, Kelly Vaughn, very nice girl. We worked very well together. Fortunately, she got sick and passed away. It was very,
that's
it
terrible,
was, it, you
Sad.
know, it was sad. It wasn't expected, and it sort of left us, you know, in the loop by myself.
Sure.
Fortunately, we did find someone who used to come in and volunteer in the office, not getting paid. He would volunteer and help out. And his name is Wilson Marquez, and he's done a great job. I mean,
So you
for
work
the
well
last-
together?
We work very well together.
Well, apparently you're moving in the right direction. The chair of the retirement board in the city of Lynn is made up of a group of people, and you can explain it in more detail. I know the chair, Mike Marks, attorney Mike Marks.
Correct.
And if anybody knows talk about going down memory lane and Legends of Lynn, Jim Marks, his dad, was the assistant superintendent of schools secondary, a marvelous man, and I think a contemporary of your father.
He was, definitely. And Michael actually went to school with my older brother.
Stevie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Who was a pretty good ball player in his own right.
Oh boy, believe me, the family, because he played for Lynn English.
Right.
And he was one of the top guards in the state. I mean, he was a very...
At that time, yeah.
He was. And my father, and that was when he was coaching at Lynn Classical. And believe me, it put myself and my mother in a really difficult spot because we didn't know who to root for. You know, we were hoping Stevie would get 30 points, but Classical would win by a point or something. But
That's terrible.
Yeah,
he was a traitor.
well,
He was a traitor, huh?
yeah, no, believe me, there was no one.
Well, Stevie played with Mike Marks. Mike Marks was a heck of a basketball player
Michael
himself. And I
Marks,
think they
too,
played on the
yes.
same team.
Yeah, I think Michael was a little older than Stevie, but they did.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Mike ended up going to BC playing for Cousy. Good ball player.
Correct.
You know, I remember your mom because my children went to Dr. Brown when they were youngsters, and I remember your mother there, and lovely, lovely lady. Okay, so Buzzy Barton, otherwise known as Gordon Barton,
Right.
is on the board, and Claire Kavanaugh.
No, it's Jamie Cerulli.
Oh.
Claire was the mayor's appointment. The mayor switched to Jamie Cerulli.
Okay.
And
I'm glad to-
Jamie works in ISD. She's in the administration of ISD.
How do they determine who would be on the board?
Okay, that's by statute. The comptroller automatically gets a seat on the board because he represents the city's finances.
And that would be?
That is Steve Spencer.
Okay.
Okay. The two people are elected by the membership, meaning the active people that are working for the city and the retired people.
The retirees and
Right,
active, okay.
they all vote. And there are two people elected. Buzzy Barton is one, and the other one is Rich Biagiotti. Both of them are retired firefighters. Rich actually is the president of the Lynn Retirees Organization.
Okay.
And Jamie Cerulli is the mayor's appointment. The mayor gets to appoint one.
And you're subject to the board, right?
I am an employee of the board.
So they could say bye-bye to you if they wanted to.
They could.
Your name isn't Comey, is it?
No.
Oh, that's the way it works. As we speak, how many folks fall under your umbrella, both retirees and employees?
We have approximately 1,400 to 1,500 active employees and 1,200 retirees, including survivors.
Just under 3,000.
Right.
And also under your umbrella are those who misfortune, disability, on disability also, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. That would happen a lot, I would suspect, public safety, police, and fire. It's in the DPW.
Right. Yes, police and fire, they have the presumption laws. So if a fireman has lung disease, it's automatically associated, it's job related.
That's interesting. What's that? We use that phrase again?
Presumption.
So it's a presumption that whatever happened negatively that way is a consequence of their employment.
Right. You could offset it if you could prove that the person smoked 20 packs or 20 cartons
Pall
of,
Mall, yeah.
Right. You could offset it, but it's difficult.
But I think it makes eminent sense that if a person is active in the fire department and they're exposed to all types of toxics, then
Right, and there also is a hypertension presumption
well,
for police and fire. Heart problems, it definitely can be associated
Well, you'd
with the
qualify
job.
for that. Anybody that crunches numbers is,
Yeah, that's true.
is under a lot of stress. In fact, I could argue that CPAs have the highest stress level of any profession.
Especially when there are deadlines, absolutely.
So let's take a look at the breakdown. Am I mistaken, something in the area of the greatest percentage happens to be the City of Lynn employees, about 80%?
Right.
Is that about correct?
Maybe a little higher, but around there.
And then the Lynn Housing Authority constitutes about 5 or 6%?
Right.
And the rather 5 or 6% would be over at the Lynn Water Sewer Commission.
Right.
Now, is that a consequence of proportionality? Because the Lynn Water Sewer Commission technically is separate from the city entirely.
Right. When the Water and Sewer Commission came to be, part of the agreement was that they would come under the umbrella of the Lynn Retirement System.
I don't remember that, and I put it together.
Really?
Yeah, as a matter of fact.
I mean, in fact, I remember because at the meetings, at the retirement board meetings, there was a lot of discussions about that.
I was on that, the genesis of the Lynn Water Commission. I was the council representative that was in charge to create the utility at the time. It didn't exist. And one of the things that always bothered me was Mayor Marino at that time, and everybody wanted to dump all of the unfunded costs and retirement costs and buyback and all that type of stuff onto the Lynn Water Sewer Commission. And I said, I don't think so. If a person worked for the city of Lynn for 20 years and worked for the Lynn Water Sewer Commission 1 year and then retired, not going to work that way, It's got to be proportionality. That's why I asked the question. I would think that by this time that everybody from the Lynn Water Sewer Commission should have been off the books when it comes to the city.
No, they're part of the retirement system.
They are?
They are
Okay.
part of the retirement system. And the Water and Sewer pays, what they do is they pay the proportion of the appropriation based on the enrollment, based on how many employees there are. And that's what they base it on, not the past, it's actually the present. Every year we have to send to PERAC how many employees the water and sewer.
So they pay accordingly.
They pay accordingly. Right.
Well, I think that's actually a good thing.
Yes.
Even though I had no part of it. I mean,
yeah.
And it would make economic sense for the Lynn Water Sewer Commissioners to be in a larger pool.
Correct.
You know?
Absolutely.
So it's to their benefit.
Yes.
Good thinking. You make an assumption that there's going to be a 7% growth. Is that basically what you are looking at currently?
Right. That's what our current actuarial assumption is, 7.6%. Now, again, the PERAC actuary always can change that. He can lower it or raise it. And the past few years, most systems have been lowered because back in the 70s and 80s, I mean, you could make a 15% assumption, I mean, when the market was that good. So now they're being a little bit more conservative. And 7.5 is probably the average.
It's fascinating because I'm lucky to get 1% in my savings account, right?
Yes, yeah.
So when you're talking about 7% today, most retirees like myself would say, woo, that's a big, big score. And yet we're projecting 7, 15. Those were the Halligan days of the 70s, as a matter of fact. Interest rates were 18% and the rest of it. I don't know which is which, but right now the economy is booming. If this persists, how does that affect your position or the pensions position?
Oh, the better the market does, definitely it helps out the retirement system because our unfunded liability will definitely decrease. That's our goal, is to be fully funded. And, and right now it's 2034. If the market can continue to increase, and if all things go well, perhaps we can be fully funded before that.
So that's unintended consequences of good things happening, regardless of whether you're pro or anti the administration.
Correct.
Is going to benefit the retirees significantly. So it's in the best interest of all retirees, including me. I'm in a different system, being a school teacher. Why don't we get into that? I taught in the city of Lynn, yet I am not subject to your retirement system.
Right, the teachers have their own because they have a program called Retirement Plus, which is only available to teachers. And it's a little bit expensive for the teachers. They put aside, I believe it's like 11 or 12% every week.
Yeah.
But the benefits, their pension benefits, are much more enhanced than a typical school employee like a teacher aide or one of those.
So who falls under your umbrella?
Okay, the police, the fire, DPW, ISD, City Hall people, and again, the water and sewer and the housing authority.
All.
Right.
Now, the housing, that's interesting also because the housing authority is almost like a separate entity, is it not? It's somewhat, something like the Lynn Water Sewer Commission.
Correct.
And yet, again, in its best interest, it would be wise to be in a larger pool
Right.
on the same predicate.
That's right. That's right. Now, to be a member of the system, you have to be a full-time employee and work a minimum of 20 hours a week. So we don't have every employee in the city, you know, people that are part-time or temporary.
So
It's just
there
for
are
the full-time.
qualifications.
Right.
Yeah, but that's standard operating
Right.
procedure. Now, I was looking in that sheet that you talked about. You had a wonderful bar graph and a circle graph for me, and unfortunately we don't have it up there. But I noted that there was a term that drove me absolutely nuts. I had no idea what it meant, and I said, I'm going to ask about it. I finally found it. The initials are EIN. Can you explain that to me? I would try. I think it's EIN. I may be wrong, and if you can't explain it, you know, so be it. But I'm sorry, it's ERI. Goes to show you.
Oh, early retirement incentive. Okay.
What does that mean?
Because you had me with the other one.
I know,
I'm saying
because I know what I was
my mind
talking
was
about.
going, and I'm saying, what? I don't. No, early retirement incentive. Okay. What that is the state periodically will offer an early retirement incentive to try to get the higher paid and older people to retire earlier by giving them 3 more years of service or adding 3 more years or 5 more years to their age, which will increase their pension without that person having to work those 5 years. And of course the benefit is to get the higher salaries off the books and hire younger people, which helps the retirement system, because the more younger people in the system helps the retirement system in the long run.
Of course.
So that's the reason, the ERI. So the city did accept that. I believe it was in 2003. But when the system accepts the early retirement incentive, their funding schedule goes up. Their liability goes up because you're paying higher pensions than what you thought you were going to pay.
So therefore, the appropriation would have been $1 million to $2 million less had it not been for the ERI. Is that correct?
Right. But we are going to be finished. I looked at the funding schedule the other day. We are going to be finished making those extra payments in 2 years. So we will have that ERI paid for, and the benefit of the ERI, getting those younger people in the system, is going to help. So it's a long-term gain.
So the appropriations will therefore, or the city's appropriation to the pension fund will go down.
That ERI payment will be gone in 2 years.
How close are you to 50% funded?
I would say I wish, you know, I had the next study, which will be due end at the next year. But I would say
I'm not going to hold you to it.
I would say 50%. If the market keeps going like this, I would say definitely within the next 3 or 4 years.
That's really an accomplishment, because at one point in time, I noted, it was down around 30.
Right.
And that wasn't all that long ago, by the way.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. And in fact, a consequence of that was that we had to put our assets in the state fund, which is called PRIT.
Right.
And but they've been really good. I mean, we earned over 8% last year. And the good thing about PRIT, with all our assets going in there, we cut our expenditures because we didn't need investment managers. We didn't need the bank, the custodial bank, and we didn't need other investment people. We did. We said. consultants, an investment consultant. We didn't need them. The pension consultant, hundreds of thousands of dollars a
And that
year.
adds up.
It definitely adds up.
So, if I'm understanding this properly, unlike Massachusetts Transportation, well, MBTA, their fund, which is Cracker Jacks, and some really bad investments there.
Right.
In fact, I want to talk about that because Markopolis, and folks, Markopolis, you got to understand who this guy was. I mean, he said years before anybody touched Bernie Madoff that this guy was a Ponzi scheme. He kept warning, I think he worked for the SEC.
Yeah.
He kept warning him, and nobody paid any attention, except for one thing. No investment firm of any, Goldman Sachs or whatever, they would not touch Bernie, so they knew.
Yeah.
They knew it was a bad thing. But here's what he has to say about the MBTA pension fund. There's a $500 million gap there that they're not going to be able to cover. And he says, it's basically, and these are the three things I want to talk about. Bad investments. Now tell me how your investments are going in a second. Fraudulent accounting and unrealistic actuary assumptions. Those are the three big boogeymen. The city of Lynn is very transparent in all three of those. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
So why don't we go one by one on that? Tell me about our investments. I know that you have you want me to give you the chart that you sent me so that you don't have to rely on my faulty memory. A lot of it is in global stuff, isn't it?
Right. Right. The actual, we're 55% in equities, 40% global, and some in private equities.
So that's all good. It's
That's
balanced.
all good,
Right.
all good. And there is approximately 20% in fixed income, because you still need the fixed income.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's approximately 10% real estate. So it's a very diverse portfolio, and these people, Paul Tedisco is the executive director of PERT. They know what they're doing.
So, but you look at this and you make sure that everything's going right. So, folks, this is important. It's your retirement, and and if you want your retirement, you better have somebody knowing what they're doing and managing it correctly, right?
Correct.
So you can safely say that we don't have any bad investments. I mean, you're gonna have a few, but it balances off, right?
It does.
So it's pretty secure. Let's get to the second one. And this is the one that really troubles me, because a lot of people, like fake news, there's fraudulent accounting. Double dipping,
Right.
all of a sudden, there's an offset that makes it look better. None of that's happening in the Lynn pension system.
Absolutely not. Everything has to be reported. Again, PERAC mandates that. The files are all public, and there's absolutely nothing.
So anybody that needs to know about retirement in the City of Lynn and the pension fund can easily get a hold of you.
Absolutely.
And that information will be there. Transparency is the key.
Absolutely. And if I couldn't answer the question, I would find someone.
I'm sure of that. And the last one, which I think is very important, and I love the way you talked about actuarial assumptions. It's all good and well to say we're going to have a 15% growth when everybody knows it's not going to happen. So 7.6 is fairly, I think it's a little optimistic, but not much, I don't think. I don't think it were out of the universe.
No, not at all. Like last year, we made over 8%. 2 years ago, it was well over the 7%. 2015, it was low.
1.5.
It was low, right?
Yeah.
And that's the reason you make these assumptions the way you do.
But what's interesting, Gary, is that if you take a 30-year cycle and you match it up to a 5-year cycle, the most current cycle,
Right.
the line's the same.
Very close.
It works out to be
Right.
about the same at around 8% overall.
That's right.
So that's pretty good management. And your the high point, now folks, the high point at one time, I think it was around 2000 rather, 2000 or 2001, you actually funded at around 60%.
We were.
And then, look folks, what happens at the national level affects pensions. When you get involved in wars in the Middle East, when you have what happened in 2008, 2009, that has to affect the bottom line.
Correct.
And it's up to you to recover from that. And this is why we're talking about 2/3, and you're moving toward fully funding.
That's it.
And from you to go from 300 million not too long ago to 308 million, that's a pretty good little jump.
That is.
And if that continues, that's going to make it a lot easier to be fully funded, and they're not going to have to worry about eating cat food, your retirees and pensioners.
Correct. And believe me, the city is definitely, the city and the city council, they are concerned about the retired people. The health insurance, for example.
It's a killer.
The health insurance, and we have a really good plan. It's an excellent plan. The increase this year was only, I believe it was 3%. It was a real small increase as compared to the GIC, which is the state, which went up probably double that.
Weren't we self-insured?
We're self-insured.
As far as the medical is concerned, is it? Am I?
Right,
Okay.
you are correct.
So if we're being self-insured, that's a good thing, because I'd hate to be, folks, you know I'm a partisan. I hate to be in Obamacare, which is imploding all over the place, and it's killing the municipality. We talked off camera, state of Illinois, the states can't go bankrupt by law. Right. However, they're going to be a banana republic anytime soon. You know, and that's not my quote. That's the governor's quote.
Right.
I want to get to legends.
Oh, okay.
Legends of Lynn.
All right.
Now, folks, we all know, and you know, and I know, and from classical, and I'm guarantee your dad had him as a student at one time or another, was Harry Aganis.
Oh, yeah.
He's Mr. Classical, Mr. Lynn, one of the great athletes of all time.
Yeah, he practically put Lynn on the map. If you say Harry Aganis, people know Lynn.
Exactly, yeah.
Yep.
And this inauguration, I believe all the events, the Harry Aganis happening this weekend,
right. Yep.
some of it's already happened. So that's one. Now, what I'd like you folks to do on this concept, this is a new segment that we're going to have, which are Legends of Lynn. We'd like you out there to write to us, fax us, or whatever way you want to. Let us know who you think should be on our next list. 5 of them we'll do a week. Legend of Lynn, shot by ARC, as to why you say that. And it doesn't have to be, you know, a Harry Aganis type. It could be just a common guy, a woman that you know that you feel should be honored. Leslie Stahl. She's a legend of Lynn. She was born in Lynn.
And I don't think many people know that.
Yeah. 60 Minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lovely lady.
Very lovely.
And guess what? There's a guy who played a little basketball, coached a little basketball, had a son that played a little basketball, and a son who's now making sure that Lynnites are receiving their fair share for all the work that they've done. I think you know him.
Yeah, I think he has actually a gym named after him at Lynn Classical.
He does?
He does. He does. At the old Lynn Classical, that was when he retired. That was a great honor, something he'll never, you know.
Well, I remember a team he had of Bernie Sidman and Nick Panis and Stan Samuelson and a host of other players. Eddie Johns played from his
Eddie Johns, yes.
And so, yeah, he was a legend, and he had many legends.
Yes.
Who turned out to be legends.
Yeah.
And some who did quite well.
Yes.
You know, at different levels. But I remember your dad used to, who was his sidekick? Russ?
Russ Brennan, right.
Yeah.
He actually was his assistant coach, and then the job at Lynn Tech opened up.
And he took that,
And he did a great job over Lynn Tech.
And both of them used to make sure that here goes Swifty.
Yes, they did. And actually, I worked there as well. I mean, great job. Wonderland, I missed that. Back in the day, you could not drive by Wonderland on a Saturday night and not get stuck in traffic.
Absolutely.
It was just incredible.
And who was stuck in that traffic? Me and my father. That's
yes.
Going.
Yeah. But, you know, unfortunately, things happen, the lottery, the casinos, and dog racing, it just, unfortunately, outlived its
There was
time.
a motion picture that I saw many years ago with Danny DeVito. And in effect, it was set in Rhode Island, and where he was a corporate raider. And I remember him getting up in front of the factory workers who were being affected, and he said, look, once upon a time, the guy that made the whip to whip the horses with the carriage, it was a great industry, made a great whip. but his time has come and gone. And that's apparently what happened
Right.
to Wonderland. Time has come
Right.
and gone.
And-
But it was great while it lasted.
It was, and my father loved that job,
Oh.
as well as he loved coaching. He just,
Oh, I guess he did.
you know,
And actually, he was about 6'1", 6'2", but he played professionally.
he actually was signed by the Boston Celtics.
That's right.
He was, and he was that close from actually playing with them. But
In those days, you could be around 6'1", 6'2",
oh
and
yeah,
be a forward.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So it wasn't as
Well,
if he was chopped liver.
He actually like invented the one-hand shot, the one-hand.
The one-hand, that's
yeah,
right.
But he was a great player. I wish I was around when he was young and playing. But I've heard a lot of great stories. I mean, he was in so many Hall of Fames. He's in the Classical Hall of Fame, the English Hall of Fame, the Salem State Hall of Fame, the Coaches Hall of Fame. I mean, so
Yeah.
yeah.
That's why he's a legend.
He is a legend,
Yeah.
and I was totally blessed to have him as a father.
Well, he was totally blessed to have you as his son, too. It's goes two ways. There was a guy named Leo Gaudette who I had no idea who he was. And in doing research for this show, I happened to run across, I believe it was 205 or 206, roughly then, when they were doing a little analysis of the Lynn Retirement System. And I mentioned him as a legend because I was fascinated. And why don't you tell a little story? He was 92 years old.
92, I'll tell you. And
In 06, right.
Right, and he just lived in Lynn all his life. He loved the city. Anyone that loves the city, you have to give them their props. I mean, he just, everything about him. And I remember when he retired, just a great guy.
Listen, folks, he was born on a, I'm going to use numbers because I don't quite remember. He was born on 97, we'll say. It may not be correct. Williams Ave. He grew up on 117 Williams Ave. He went to fight in World War II over in the Pacific. Came back, got a GI loan, bought a house on Williams Ave at a different address. He lived his entire life on Williams Ave. There's a quote, I don't know whether you have the sheet on, I have it here, that I absolutely adore. And he said this, I was born in Lynn, and I will die in Lynn. People criticize the city, but it's my city. I never wanted to live anywhere else, and he didn't. His father lived to be 100, by the way. I'm pretty sure that he's not with us anymore. But Leo, wherever you are, you're a legend.
He is.
And now that gets to the guy who is the genesis of this Legends of Lynn. I went to Market Basket, and I bumped into one of the all-time favorites, Richie Sims. Now, folks, Richie Sims was probably one of the fastest cops there ever was. You could not get away from him if you were trying to evade getting grabbed. Great guy. I think he's low 80s now, 82 or so, and a legend in his own time, along with his brother Walter, and they both were jazz players on top of it. I mean, can you imagine a cop jazz player? That would be a hit series today.
Yeah.
So, Richie, I thank you for coming up with the idea of Legends of Lynn, and you are certainly a legend. And if you see Walter, give him my best. Walter was a terrific bass player and all that type of stuff. But who would you have?
Well, I was just going to add about Richie. I first met Richie when his son played at St. Joseph's, and I was coaching basketball there. And his son Richie was a very, very good player and a great kid. And then that's where I met Richie, his father, and he came to very supportive, came to all the games. Great guy.
I'm sorry.
And of course, then I got to know him in the police force because he come in to the retirement office when it was his time to retire. He still does come in, and he's just a great guy.
And he wears that hat.
Yes, he does.
He has the hat all the time.
Yes.
There's an old adage, and once upon a time we had a feature on the show called Adages and Axioms and things of that. I'm going to bring those back. And you've all heard it. It's a cliche. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Happened with you, happened with Richie and his son. Anchors away. Pedro, we got some thoughts to make on Anchors Away. So let's get that little baby up there. So it is with fanfare and revival. The revival of the Lynn Ferry, which died of natural causes simply because it costs too much to operate and took in too little. So why the chair? Well, complicit in the hoopla is the Lynn item that has a propensity to use partisan party labels in what is otherwise non-partisan municipal election. So, I wonder, could it be an election year? In resurrecting the Lynn ferry, Senator McGee sought the help of the MBTA Control Board. Coincidentally, the senator chairs the Joint Committee on Transportation that oversees the MBTA. Interestingly, as mentioned before, Harry Markopoulos of Bernie Madoff fame claims that the MBTA pension fund is one bear market away from disaster. He cites poor management and oversight as the underlying cause of the MBTA's problems, unlike the Lynn Pension Fund. Given the MBTA's Control Board's involvement in the Lynn Ferry, coupled with the ferry's historically high operational costs and low returns, one wonders why the item is so intent on hyping the ferry's restoration. It makes you wonder. I'm fascinated by that. I mean, why would we... There was a trial to allow the ferry to see if it could become operational. They gave it 3 years. And Governor Baker, who, by the way, happens to be a Republican, and he's considered one of the more popular governors in the entire United States, and he took a beating because he cut back the funds on the ferry, and he did it because it didn't pay its freight. Gave him every opportunity in the world. It's fascinating to me that all of a sudden they're resurrecting it, and it costs several tens of $20-30 per ride, and yet they're only charging me, a senior, $350 to take a ride. So it's a lost leader. I mean, in a time when you have constraints like the city of Lynn does, isn't there better ways to allocate money and resources than just throw it away to the wind on a perk?
I would think so. I mean, from what I've read, the other side, the side that says that we should have the ferry is that there just wasn't enough time. The time span with the low riders, it wasn't long enough to get more, maybe a clearer picture of whether it would be profitable or whether the city would take a hit. I mean, just now with all the construction and everything, that's part of the reasons that they're quoting. The best thing if the blue line came to Lynn. I mean, that's the bottom line. That would be the number one.
And folks don't realize that they could make connections with it, with a loop. But that's another show and another issue.
Right.
Here is the thing. We know that there are fixed costs. No matter how you cut the ice, there's a fixed cost that the ferry must arrive at before it can get the profit. That whether it's the ferry, whether it's buses, whether it's airplanes, no matter what, there's a fixed cost. So if you're selling a product for $1 that costs you $2 to make, you're not going to be in business too long. And that's the problem with the ferry. The ferry was producing or provided a service that costs more than they could ever expect to get in return. Now, if it was fairly close, it'd be nice to have it. But we're not in boom times now. And we have a city that is struggling to make ends meet, in which potentially 40 city employees, most of them being policemen, who are going to get laid off unless they can raise a couple of $1 million, which I don't like the idea of raising fees and taxes. But that's the reality. So instead of fooling around with a ferry that's a lost leader, maybe it's a better idea to try to figure out how to straighten out the budget in the city of Lynn so that we can maintain the services without whacking the taxpayer again. You had to do it in 2008 and 2009 when the market crashed. You know, you had to come up with some creative solutions.
Right.
And as I'm sitting here with you now, I'm looking at $308 million assets. I'm looking at a fund that's on its way to 50%, which is pretty darn good when it was down to 35.
Right.
And by the year at the outset, 2034 is going to be fully funded. That's moving in the right direction, my friend.
Yes.
And I wish that people would kind of think long term. I'm not going to be around in 234. Let's face it, I hope I am, but probably not. Although if I did, I'd be your father's age, would you believe it?
That's right.
And here's the thing, folks. If you don't think of your grandchildren in the future, you shouldn't even be thinking. Because that's what life's all about. You know the Chinese, when they built the Great Wall of China, the Great Canal, which, by the way, the canal is far more significant than the Great Wall. People don't realize that. They projected it out 2,000 years or 1,000 years. They knew it would take a long time to build. They knew they weren't going to be beneficiaries of it. But their progeny would be. And we ought to think a little bit more like that. Particularly someone like you and me and Mike Marks and Richie Sims and all these legends of Lynn and the Aganis family and the rest of them who love Lynn and want to keep it the way it was. It can't happen unless we got to have a goose that lays some eggs.
Right.
Mark it down. America's first experiment with socialism. How do you like this one? Pilgrims landed in 1620. They established a communal society and planted a community garden. The idea was that everyone would work together and share equally at the end of the season. The reality was that most were reluctant to plant and weed a garden that wasn't theirs. The result was poor crops and a winter of hunger. By 1623, the colony faced starvation. Socialism had failed and a new system was decided upon. The new system, anchored in the concept of private property, allowed the colonists to keep the fruits of their labor. Lo and behold, and so it was, that capitalism succeeded where socialism had failed. The colony thrived when once it had starved. Capitalism versus socialism. Mark it down. You like that one, huh? So now we're on to witticisms. You better go pick. You're a co-host here. So you see this is witty. We're going to get witty. Witty's coming up, folks. Pay patience. And the very first witty you provided for me. So you're reading it.
All right. I figured this was apropos to the topic of pensions and retirement.
Right.
Okay, this was done by Will Rogers. We could certainly slow the aging process down if it had to work its way through Congress.
Oh, that's really good. I never killed a man, but I read many an obituary with great deal of satisfaction. Mark Twain.
The woman speaks 8 languages and can't say no in any of them. Dorothy Parker.
Oh, God. I hope we got in trouble with that one. If you want to tell people the truth, make them laugh. Otherwise, they'll kill you. Oscar Wilde. Things to think about, my friend. Did you know that the person who invented the Frisbee was cremated and made into a Frisbee after he died?
I had no idea.
What happened in 2015?
In 2015, more people were killed from injuries caused by taking a selfie than by shark attacks.
The Titanic was the first ship that used the SOS, unfortunately.
Oh boy, pirates wore earrings because they believed it improved their eyesight.
Goes to show you, huh? I didn't know this, folks. 77 years, birds don't urinate. Get that? They don't urinate. They do a lot of other stuff.
Yes, they do. And finally, the Bible is the most shoplifted book in the world.
Isn't that something?
That's something.
Let me ask you, from a farmer's show, we're going to test your acumen. What is the only food that never spoils? Boom, 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 boom.
The only
I never knew, so don't feel bad.
Oh, okay. The only food that never...
The nectar of the gods. Honey.
Oh, God. I
never
would
knew
have got that.
I never knew that, though. I mean, imagine that. So if we're going to have, if the North Koreans start lobbing missiles at us and we have to go bury ourselves somewhere, make sure you bring your honey with you,
All right, I'll remember that. I'm going to stock up on it now.
Oh, yeah. If you want to know what's happening in Lynn, and this was coming up, this is Frankly Joe's next week's show, it's a pretty good idea to listen to people who actually live in Lynn. Knowing Lynn is only part of the equation. Understanding Lynn is what's important. Albert Einstein once said, any fool can know. The point is to understand. He also said E equals MC squared, which I neither understand nor know. Malcolm Mitchell knows Lynn. I suspect he also understands Lynn. But we're going to find out next week, here in Frankly Speaking. So we got that. We're going to get to comments. It's been a pleasure having you here, by the way.
Thank you. It's been great being here.
Get over to those comments, my friend, because you're going to have to help me out there over there somewhere. And I'm looking for my. These are comments from our trusted viewers, who, by the way, are very intelligent, unlike some other programs that I won't mention. Apparently, people from the Hunt, this is one of our respondents, people from the Hunt have been dumping their trash in Lynn for years, so they don't have to pay a fee. What will happen now? I never knew they did that. Did you?
No.
I don't know what they do. So I do know this, is that, and that's coming up, or it's coming up this evening as we tape. We tape on Tuesday, folks. So this evening, which is the 27th, the City Council will be, I guess, debating whether to go with the trash fee or not.
Correct. In fact, they're having public hearings at 5:30, and the council meeting will be at 8, so...
You know, as one who's reluctant to raise taxes and fees, you know, fees, folks, is a euphemism for taxes. At least this one makes a little sense, and it's punishing someone all of us can agree should be punished, and that's absentee landlords.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So it isn't as if there's a good guy in this one, you know. And it's fairly limited because 6 families, I never knew this myself, that post 6 family, they have to provide their own.
They have to do that right themselves.
And I guess businesses who have been beneficiaries of trash now have to pony up
They have
about
to pay a fee.
$40.
Right.
Comes to about $500 a year.
Right.
That's a small price to pay to have the services that we need. Now understand this, folks. The city of Lynn has 16,500 students in its public school system with a population of a little over 90,000. Quincy has 92,000 population and has 9,700 students in its system. See the point? Lynn's proportion of students to population is way out of whack. Why? Because of open borders and sanctuary city concepts and things of that nature that attracted, and housing, that attracted folks to the city of Lynn, as it attracted my parents from Sicily to come here. So this is not anti-immigrant. But the volume has been too great for the city to sustain. If you take a look, and this is important, if you take a look at the per pupil cost in the city of Lynn, it's quite conservative, 13.6 thousand per student, which is lower than, for example, Swampscott at 15, Salem at 17, Cambridge at 27, and you know how whacked out they are over in Cambridge. So the point being is, give the mayor, give the superintendent some credit for doing a commendable job of keeping the per pupil costs down. But when they were seeking help from the state and from the federal government, they got this, ice in the wintertime. They weren't, Judy actually went to Washington, D.C. to plead the case 3 years ago. 3 years ago. She went on national TV. They vilified her. They called her a racist. They called her all kinds of names. She was right then, she's right now. The city of Lynn is a beautiful place. It has to stay that way if, in fact, we have policies that make sense, spread the wealth, so to speak, you know? I'm off on a tangent again. The great show, you read about, I don't want to beat our own chest here. This is yours.
Okay. This comment, a great show. DC was on point about nonprofits in all subjects. Glad we lost the last 2 stuffed shirts who were council presidents.
Yeah, DC stands for the current council president, otherwise known as Darren Sayre.
Darren Sayre.
We had him on last week, and by the way, you did a commendable job in filling his seat. And you tell him when you see him,
Okay,
right?
I will.
But Darren, thank you for coming on last week, and you did do a great job. He's another person like you, down to earth. Come to find out that he's related to who was considered, contrary to the Bible and Samson, considered the strongest man that ever lived, a guy named Louis Sayre. Would you believe this one?
Wow.
Yeah. So I looked him up, and he's related to him. And then he gave me this whole litany of how many Sayres there were and how they were the progenitors to anything good that happened in the United States, unlike you and I.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But no, Darren, thanks for being here. Lynn's Hidden Jewels, and we have many of those.
Yes, we do.
Over and above Lynn Woods, which is a standard, that golf course, I have a nephew of mine who's one hell of a golfer, scratch golfer, and he comes up to play Salem and to play Myopia every year. He likes the Valley, loves the Valley.
It's a tough course. I mean, yeah.
Are you a golfer, lefty?
I used to play golf, and I played at Happy Valley, and it's a challenging course. It's a really good course. I mean, it's not a course you can just go on. There are definitely different type holes in there. There's a lot of walking, which is good if you want exercise. I mean, you can't go wrong with that.
So it is a jewel.
It is, absolutely.
I think our shoreline's a jewel. Every time, and you grew up off of the Hunt Street, so you're familiar with taking a little hike down to the beach. Every time I see Lynn Harbor, there's a comfort zone. I go to other places that don't have the same comfort zone. Looking at that rock out there gives me a sense of peace and belonging and scope. I find Red Rock in that area gorgeous.
Oh, as a kid, I used to go there. Oh, the whole summers I would spend there. Just great memories.
And you know, to see our citizens walking on around there with their dogs and their friends and their family, it's a beautiful sight. So that is a jewel. I don't think you can replicate that shoreline. And I like Gloucester, but Gloucester doesn't have the same ambiance that shoreline does there.
And I think we take it for granted. I do a lot of traveling. Some states I go to, and they are so jealous. They tell me, you don't know how lucky you are to have, you know, a beach in the ocean. We would give our right arm for it, and we have it right here, and sometimes we take it for granted.
And we are probably one of the greatest reservoir systems.
Yes.
I mean, our water supply is unbelievable.
Yes, it is.
So, you know, we can't really get to this last one because we're plumb out of time.
Oh.
And it just flew, and
Yes,
it was
it
an
did.
absolute pleasure having you here, Gary. I hope you'll come again and keep us posted when you have the next get-together.
Okay.
And let us know how the retirees of the City of Lynn are doing.
All right.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much. It
Appreciate
was my
it.
pleasure.
Folks, until we meet again, have yourself a great, great week.